Hi guys and welcome back. My name is Caleb and we're still on the class section. In our previous class we talked about how what classes are and how we can define classes, and we looked at a simple customer class. Now in this section we're going to go further to talk about we are going to go further to see more examples, and what I'm going to do here is that I'm going to start with what we've already talked about, and we're going to expand on that and see a couple of more things that are related to class, and I'm going to try to break them down so that you can understand better. But I'm not going to be using Visual Studio Code. I'm going to be using Jupyter Notebook because I want to write my code and execute it by pressing Shift Enter instead of switching between the terminal and the text editor like I was doing in this section. So if you want to get Jupyter Notebook, you can quickly go to anaconda.com/distribution and then you click on it to download. It comes with Jupyter Notebook and some other things which you would need if you are interested in data science. And if you are really interested in data science, you should subscribe because I'm going to start a series on data science and machine learning soon. So you should click on it. So click on the subscription button and follow the course so that once I start that one, you will also be part of it. Now let's come back to what we're talking about. We are going to be creating a car class and class car, and this one you already know, and then we'll start by creating an init method using two double underscore at the beginning and two trailing underscores, and then we're going to pass in what we need, which is the first parameter should be self, and then what we want for the car is the year of manufacture, the make of the car, as well as the model of the car. So these are the things we need from the car class. Once we create an instance, we should be passing in these three parameters. So we're going to initialize them here. Self.year equal year, self.make equal make, self.model equals model. So now we have defined and initialized the class. The next method I want to create inside this class is a method that should give the descriptive name of the class. So let's call it the name of the class get descriptive name, and then because we want to use all the information that is passed through this place, we're going to pass in self as the only parameter here. But in some subsequent classes, we'll see how we can pass in some other parameters that are not part of this main one. So now I'll create a variable inside here called descriptive name, or let's remove this. I'll just return the descriptive name, return, and then what do I want to return? I want to return this is how I want it to be, the make, the model, and the year, which should be in braces like this. But now if we run this, we're going to get an issue, and the issue is that we're just giving the make, model, and year which is coming in, but what the method inside the class uses, they are these ones here. So we should always include the self.make, self.model, and self.year. Alright, now I can run this method, I can run this class. Next thing I'm going to do now is to create an instance of the class. Let's call this my new car, the name of the instance I want to create, car. And then what do we pass in? We're going to pass in the year, which is let's say 2020, and then we're going to pass in the make of the car, Toyota, and then we're going to pass in the model, Camry. So these are the information we want to pass in. Now I can run this, and then I've created an instance. So we can see that if I want to see the year of the car, my new car dot year, it prints the. Okay, I'm sorry about that, and I'm not going to edit it. I forgot to place in this car here, so that's why we got an error. So now if I should run this again, we can now see that we get 2020 as the car, and then I can try to print this inside of here, my new car, and then we can call the descriptive name, which is get descriptive name, and it is a function. Nothing happened, and you can see we have the descriptive name show for us. If we're using if you're using Visual Studio Code, remember, if you're using Visual Studio Code, you have to put this in a print statement so that it gets to print it. But now I'm using this, I'm using Jupyter Notebook, and it automatically displays for me. That's one fun part of using Jupyter Notebook. Now the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to create another instance of a car. Let me do that here. But now I'll call this one my vintage car. So this is a vintage car, which is going to be gotten from the car class. The year is 1919, and the model is TQ. Which one comes first? Okay, the type of the car, which is Ford, and then the model, which is TQ. So this is another car that has been created. So if I run this again on my vintage car dot get description, we can see we have this. And remember, I told you that whatever we can apply to functions, we can apply here. So what I can do now is I'll take this f string, this string here, I'll cut this out of here, and I'll create a variable for it called descriptive name, and it's going to be equal to what I cut out. Now descriptive. Now I'm going to return the descriptive name with a title, which is a method we can use inside of functions as well as this. So if I should run this again, we can see now that all the first letters that we pass in starts with capital. So we can still do the same thing here, and you see that. So you can see that we can apply whatever we're applying to functions can also be applied to method, because there is no difference at all. Now another thing we're going to be looking at now is how we can set default values for our variables here. So I'm going to copy this class here, and I'll paste here, and now I'm going to add something here, self.odometer, which is the mileage, and I will give it 0 at first. So you can see the default value now is 0. So now what I can do is to print out the odometer value, which I can create another function for it called read odometer. So it's going to be taking off everything as well, self. So now I can return an f string to the car, or let's say let's pass in these values. Let's make it your your make self.make self.model has self.odometer miles on it. So if I save this now, I can save this, and then let's copy this again to create instances. So I'll create the instances here. Now if I want to read this other one, if I want to read my new car, I can say something like my new car dot read odometer to see the miles it has on it. So if I should run this now, we see that it has, your Toyota Camry has 0 miles on it. So we can, what we've seen here is that we can pass in default values inside. And now the next thing we're going to be looking at is how we can modify these default values. So there are a couple of ways we can modify these default values here. The first one is doing it directly like this. I want to modify the one for only my new car and not my vintage car. What I can do is my underscore new car dot odometer, which is the value here, which is what we have here, and then we can just give it a new value of what, let's say 40, and we've done that. So if I print this out again, the read odometer, my new car dot read odometer, if I should print this out again, we can now see that we have something else. Your Toyota Camry has 40 miles on it. I'll do some slight modification here. Instead of odometer, let's make it reading. Okay, and then let's put some functions in here. Oh, not here, rather, but here. Dot title dot title. I think the video is getting rather long, but I want you to understand this. That's why I'm taking my time to do all of this, so that you can grasp the concept. The title as well. Now I'll run this and I'm having an error here. Okay, this isn't supposed to be here. Okay, now I'll run this again, and now we're having an error, which is because of the fact, what have we changed? My new car does read odometer. Wow, the odometer is supposed to be the odometer reading, not the title. So I'm not going to edit these things. I want you to see them and see mistakes you can make as a developer. So that has been done. So now we can see it has 0 miles on it. So I can modify dot odometer reading, and then you can now see that we have, it still works. Now another way we can modify it is by creating a new function. So I'll copy this again. The reason why I'm doing this like this is because I'm going to upload this on GitHub, so that, and I'll also post the link, so that when you come and when you look at it, you'll understand what I'm doing, and I will give them some headings so that you understand what's happening. So what I'm going to do now is I'll create another method, and this one is going to be update odometer reading. And it will only do one thing. All it does is that it's going to receive a value. Let's call the value mileage, is going to receive a value, and we've not talked about this, so I want you to see this now. We're going to update a function from outside of the class. So I want you to take a look at this. So all it's going to do is that it's going to update the self dot. It's supposed to also take self because we're trying to access these values here. So it's supposed to also take self, and it's going to take a new value called mileage. Self dot odometer reading, and it's going to give it the new mileage which is coming in. And that's all. So if I should now run this, and I'll take the class instances again, and I'll paste here and run again. So if I check my vintage car now, my vintage car dot read odometer, if I should run this, it has 0 miles. Now if we want to update it, I'll say my vintage car dot read dot update odometer reading, and remember we will have to pass in a value, and I want to update it with, let's say, 66, and then it has been updated. To see it now, we have to run the other one that shows it, which is my vintage car dot read odometer. So if I should run this, you can now see that we have your Ford Kuga has 66 miles on it. So I'll do a recap on all I have talked about here. So I started by creating a class, and I initialized the class to have the year of manufacture, the make, and the model, and then I created a function that should give a descriptive name of the car, and then I created the class a variable called descriptive name, and then it took all of this and we returned it and gave it a title function so that it changes all to title, and then we initialized it. This one should be understood. And what we did in this second part of it was that we saw how we can give default values for a class. Let's take, for instance, you're making a class for something and you want something to be a specific value unless it is changed. That is what we're doing here, and we gave it a default value of 0 here, and then here we also saw how we can modify it. We can modify it from inside. We can modify it like this by just changing the value to 0 and then running it, and then we can also modify it in this instance here by creating a new method inside of the class that is taking another attribute called mileage. So when we ran that, when we tried to update it, we passed in the value which we want, and then it went in here and updated it, so that when we printed it out again, we found out that we have gotten it updated inside of the class itself. So we should take note of that. And like I said, this video, I'll still take another section to explain more about classes before we then go and talk about inheritance and some other things we can do with classes. Alright, but before that, I want to explain something else. Now, if we take a look at this, if I can try to update this class with let's say I want to update my new car dot update odometer. I can pass in a negative value, let's say 46, and if I try to run this, my new car dot read odometer, if I run this, it has -6 miles on it, but it is not ideal to run a negative value here. So how do we solve this problem? We can solve this problem by giving some conditions inside of our function class, which is what I'll do now before I end the video. So I'll just copy all of this I'll copy this part of the class and I'll paste here. So what do we want to do? So we can run the condition here. We say if the new mileage we are bringing in is greater than or equal to what we already have, which is self dot odometer reading, then this should work. Otherwise, we can do something like we do a print that says you can't roll back an odometer. So I can now save this. Let me fix this with double quotes. So I can save this now, and I should run this, and then let's try that again. I will initialize my values. Sorry, I will create my instances, and let's try to for my new car, let's try to update odometer with a low value. Self dot update odometer, let's say we want to update with a low value of -12. So we can see it gives us that warning, we can't roll back odometer. Now let's do something else. Let's try to update it with a value that is greater than 0. It works, and we can print it out. My new car dot read odometer. So we can see it has 12 miles on it. Now let's try to update it with this a value that is less than 12, but not a negative value. Let's say 8, and then we see we get the same error. So we can see we can also put in conditions inside of a class. So this is where we wrap up this section. We're going to continue on classes in the next section.